In 2019, AirshowStuff and This is Flight recorded countless hours of airshow action across Europe and North America. In this two-part series, we focus not on the regular displays seen year in, year out, but on the rare overseas appearances, new performers, and one-off set-piece displays that made 2019 so unique. Part 1 of this programme showcases 2019's Military Airshow Action. We'll visit Yuma for dramatic air power demonstrations featuring the F-5, F-35 and Harrier, and take in a rare 4-ship US Air Force heritage flight at Oshkosh. At Aviation Nation, highlights include the all-new F-35A Demo Team and the spectacular Combined Arms demonstration. On the other side of the Atlantic, we'll dip into some of the award-winning performances at this year's Royal International Air Tattoo, including the spectacular Finnish F-18 Hornet. AeroBaltic in Poland brings us Eastern Bloc fighters in the form of the Su-22 Fitter and Su-27 Flanker. We also show the Spanish Army's memorable Tiger demonstration at sunset at Festa Alcel. Part 2 is dedicated to Warbird Airshow Action, and the 75th anniversary of D-Day features prominently, with mass flyovers of Dakotas in the UK and at Oshkosh. The P-51 Mustang makes a strong showing with large-scale set-piece displays at several shows, and we'll also see the world's only flying XP-82 twin Mustang. The Shuttleworth collection provides some unforgettable memories as ever, not least a pair of Avro 504Ks and a historic 7-ship formation of Hawker Hurricanes. Thunder over Michigan made history too, with its combined display of no fewer than 11 Corsairs. And there's plenty of classic jet action throughout Part 2, the Viggen and Hunter of the Swedish Air Force Historic Flight in Poland, and a pair of CT-133 Silver Stars at Airshow London in Canada, not to mention a stunning sunset performance by Randy Ball in his MiG-17 at Goshen. This is Airshow Action 2019. We start at Marine Corps Air Station Yuma, whose annual air show has become one of the traditional season openers in the United States. This year's show featured the locally based Marine Fighter Training Squadron 401 and 4 of their F-5N Tiger IIs. MTFS 401 is the only aggressor squadron in the Marine Corps, and this display demonstrates an air-to-air combat training exercise in which the F-5s face off against a UH-1Y Venom and AH-1Z Viper. The Northrop F-5 family started out with the T-38 Talon, which we'll see later on, followed by the F-5A/B Freedom Fighter, which first flew in 1959. The upgraded F-5E Tiger II made its first flight in 1972, and that's how these 4 aircraft started out flying with the Swiss Air Force. 11 F-5Es and 1 dual-seat F-5F were then purchased from the Swiss by the US Marine Corps, where the E-model jets were given a comprehensive avionics upgrade and redesignated the F-5N, with that model flying for the first time in 2003. A second roll demonstration now from the Marine Air Ground Task Force. This display follows an airfield attack scenario led by an F-35B Lightning II and AV-8B Harrier. With the bulk of enemy ground forces taken care of, the coast is clear for the insertion of ground troops who arrive by CH-53C Stallion and MV-22 Osprey, and they're escorted again by a Venom and Viper.
The break. First one out. The F-35 Lightning II, a 4 count, and a similar bank from the AV-8B Harrier.
Our second show is America's Freedom Fest in Goshen, Indiana. Always a photogenic event, Goshen this year saw some memorable warbird displays, which you can find in Part 2. The C-54 Skymaster and MiG-17 are among them. But there were several military performances too, and we start with a rare demonstration by a UH-60 Blackhawk of the Indiana Air National Guard. With over 4,000 Blackhawks built and over 30 military operators globally, the Blackhawk has a litany of uses, primarily tactical transport, but later variants have also been designed for search and rescue and medevac roles, as well as VIP transport, light attack, and even special forces work. For example, it was highly modified stealth Blackhawks that were allegedly used in the assassination of Osama bin Laden in 2011. Next up, a regular sight on the US Airshow circuit in the form of the US Air Force F-22A Raptor Demonstration Team. The F-22 is a remarkably manoeuvrable aircraft with two immensely powerful F-119 engines putting out a combined 60,000 pounds of thrust. Those engines also incorporate 20 degrees of two-dimensional thrust vectoring, and that, combined with the aircraft's enormous stabilators and twin-tail design, means it handles exceptionally well at high angles of attack. You can see that here during this pedal turn, which looks almost like a flat spin, but is in fact a high alpha turning descent with the aircraft flying at up to 60 degrees angle of attack. This is the power loop, the Raptor's version of the cool bit. Manoeuvre flown for the very first time by the renowned Russian test pilot Yevgeny Frolov in the 1990s, and one which can only be achieved by the Raptor, the F-35 and a handful of Russian fighters. Then into a loaded barrel roll. A very impressive tail slide next, using some tricks of the eye very cleverly here. If you saw this manoeuvre side on, you'd see the aircraft is always carrying a fair bit of forward motion, but immensely impressive nonetheless. The F-22 is the only afterburning Western fighter capable of executing such a manoeuvre. Next up, we cross the Atlantic to visit the world's largest military airshow. Held at RAF Fairford, the Royal International Air Tattoo 2019 attracted 245 aircraft from 39 air arms. It's difficult to narrow the show down to a few minutes of highlights, with so many high-quality performances packing out the 7-hour daily flying displays. So we'll focus primarily here on the 2019 award winners, starting with the Finnish Air Force F-18C Hornet. This truly was an unforgettable display and an award winner on all 3 of its most recent Air Tattoo appearances. In 2019, it claims the very rare honour of receiving 2 awards at a single show, the Sir Douglas Bader Trophy for the Best Individual Flying Demonstration and the As the Crow Flies Trophy for the Best Overall Display as voted by spectators in the RIAT enclosure. And it's easy to see why, as the Finns very proudly show off the aircraft's latest avionics upgrades, which have completely removed all software angle of attack limitations. That doesn't mean the aircraft can pull any more G, but it does mean the onset of G, the onset of alpha, can be ludicrously fast in this aircraft, and its manoeuvrability is quite unprecedented among 4th generation Western fighters. Exiting that square loop, long a staple of Hornet displays, the aircraft will now climb into a half Cuban before pointing back at the crowd, executing a high G turn and then an extreme high alpha barrel roll. And you'll see the aircraft looking like it's skidding through the sky as it pitches, rolls and yaws simultaneously. Another persistent air tattoo award winner now, the Frecce Tricolori, who won the RAF CTE trophy for the best display by an overseas participant.
Green, white, red was the fun roll. And then the separation of Apollo 313. Apollo section separated by the solo usually reserved to prop aircraft. Once again vertical, standing up to the sky, 2 rolls, 2 spins, and then silence. And so let's introduce him. This was the Lomsovac of the number 10 of Frecce Tricolori, ladies and gentlemen, our solo major, Massimiliano Salvatore.
This is a classic Frecce Tricolori manoeuvre. The 2 halves of the main formation draw a heart in the sky, not top to bottom, but bottom to top, and they're the only jet aerobatic team in the world to do so currently. Frecce Tricolori are the world's joint largest aerobatic team. They share the top spot with the Egyptian team, the Silver Stars, who also fly 10 aircraft. The MB339 really is an ideal performer though, exceptionally manoeuvrable, and those straight wings really do lend a lot of structure to the shape of the formations. Another Italian display now, not an award winner, but definitely a performance of note, the C-27J Spartan. And if you think this is going to be an ordinary transport aircraft display, then think again, because after that gutsy takeoff comes a full-on derry turn, always sure to provoke gasps of astonishment from the unsuspecting crowd. This performance comes from the Reparto Sperimentale Volo, the Italian Air Force's flight test centre, who have for many years staged some of the best military solo demonstrations in the world. This was one of 3 RSV displays at RIAT 2019, the others being the T-346 Master and the F-2000A Typhoon. And we really are just scratching the surface of these fantastic displays. There are longer videos of some of them on the This Is Flight YouTube channel. The 2019 RIAT CEO Award went to the Spanish Navy for their 2-ship AV-8B2+ Matador display. This was the first time Spanish Navy Harriers had participated in the air tattoo since 1994, and the first Harrier display here of any kind since 2010, so an extremely welcome appearance, given the affection with which the British crowd have always viewed this highly innovative Hawker design. This too was a somewhat emotional performance. The Royal Air Force shot Tucano T.1 with its very last air tattoo performance, so a bittersweet moment to see the Tucano display resurrected for the first time since 2014, but also for the very last time ahead of the type's retirement in autumn 2019.
In the top rudder until the aircraft appears to stall and hang in midair at 2,500 feet. Liam joined the Royal Air Force directly from university, and I joined the Royal Navy after my A-level studies. Now fairly early in both our military careers, at the ages of 27 and 24, we have the opportunity to operate as a display team here today. May I present for the very final time at RAF Fairford, the 2019 Royal Air Force Tucano display!
The Experimental Aircraft Association's AirVenture show in Oshkosh has long been the world's greatest aviation celebration. Running for a week and attracting over 10,000 aircraft, AirVenture is on any enthusiast's bucket list. And, like at RIAT, we can only scrape the surface of the flying displays here. Luckily, we'll be featuring more of it in Part 2. And there's also a standalone 50-minute film on the AirshowStuff YouTube channel. We begin here with a rare 4-ship US Air Force heritage flight. AirVenture 2019 had the unique honour of bringing together 3 of the 4 US Air Force demonstration teams, namely the F-22A Raptor, which we saw earlier, the A-10C Thunderbolt II, and the F-35A Lightning II, which we'll look at later on. Here, they fly with a P-51D Mustang. Sequence of low approaches now from the F-35 and F-22. So we've seen the F-35A and B variants already in this film, but AirVenture also afforded the rare opportunity to see a mini demonstration by the US Navy F-35C. Well, spot the difference, and there are three big ones. Strength and landing gear, including dual nose wheels, the addition of a tailhook and catapult tow bar, and much larger wings to improve low-speed handling when operating from aircraft carriers, although the wingtips can fold away when parked, so the aircraft takes up less space on the carrier deck. We stay with the US Navy, with two T-45 Goshawks now performing a legacy flight with their predecessor, the T-2 Buckeye. And like the F-35C, the carrier-capable T-45 differs visually from the BAE Hawk 60 on which it's based. Again, strength and landing gear, a tailhook and tow bar, but also the aircraft has squared-off wingtips, a larger tailplane, and because of that tailhook, the air brake has been moved from underneath the vertical stabilizer to either side of the tail. We'll see the standard Hawk 60 in the hands of the Royal Saudi Air Force later on in the film, so see if you can spot those differences.
XD-82, roger, make sure they can come.
Thunder over Michigan is one of North America's great warbird air shows, and we'll be featuring it extensively in Part 2, not least its 8-ship display of Mustangs and its 11-ship formation of Corsairs. But there was some unique military action too, including some unusual flybys from the US Air Force. First up, a pair of F-15E Strike Eagles.
Here come the Strike Eagles in a tactical formation. As these two airplanes that are close together will set up for landing, and I think we'll see them do the break here.
Then a trio of T6 Texan IIs. The Texan II takes the name of the iconic T6 Texan, the Second World War era training aircraft, which went on to become one of the most produced aeroplanes of all time. Although the Texan II is in fact based on a Swiss product. It started out in life as the Pilatus PC-7, which first flew in 1966 but is still in production today and remains in service with over 20 military operators. That became the PC-9 in 1984, and finally the Beechcraft T6 Texan II, which first flew in 1998. Actually, aside from the Texan getting a slightly newer, more powerful engine, it's otherwise almost identical to the PC-9, although the Texan has sold considerably better, with over 850 built in comparison to around 250 PC-9s.
What are you guys going to do now?
They're doing a break, I believe.
Okay, I need for you to spin around. I got traffic departing off to the left.
Gdynia AeroBaltic is one of the newest additions to the European airshow scene, and in 4 short years it's quickly morphed into one of the continent's great aviation celebrations. With up to 9 hours of daily flying displays split across 2 venues, AeroBaltic features everything from rare military jets to tiny ultralights, in what is surely one of the most varied airshows found anywhere in the world. In 2019, quite a coup for the organisers, with a rare European display by the Saudi Hawks. Founded in 1998, the Saudi Hawks only ventured into European skies for the first time in 2011. This was their only European show of 2019 and their first visit to the continent in 2 years. They are notably similar in style to the Red Arrows, not surprising perhaps, as ex-Red Arrows pilots have been involved in advising and training the team over the years. But make no mistake, the Saudi Hawks perform a very attractive display with some highly original and imaginative manoeuvres. The Saudi Hawks actually hold the world record for the largest ever sky drawing, during which they create the Saudi national symbol of a palm tree crossed with 2 swords, and you can see that being drawn now as the display's finale. The Ukrainian Air Force pulled out all the stops in 2019, participating in AeroBaltic for the very first time. They sent an Ilyushin Il-76 Candid and Sukhoi Su-24 Fencer for the static display, as well as this Su-27 P1M Flanker of the 831st Guards Tactical Aviation Brigade in Mirror Rod. Here's another tail slide like that of the F-22 we saw earlier. When this manoeuvre was seen for the first time in the West during the MiG-29's Farnborough Airshow debut in 1988, it sent the airshow world into meltdown. It simply hadn't been conceived in the West before. It quickly became a staple capability of 4th-generation Russian fighters with the Su-27 here, and then with the 3-dimensional thrust vectoring developments of the Su-27, such as the Su-30 and Su-35. And of course, we see a similar party trick from several 5th-generation aircraft, including the Su-57 and F-22. Worth noting that this display barely scratches the surface of the Su-27's epic manoeuvrability. It's not a patch on the early flanker displays by Russian test pilots in the 1990s and early 2000s, for instance. That's partly to preserve the airframe life of Ukraine's ageing fighter fleet, but still a very memorable presentation. And you can see more of this display and others in the half-hour AeroBaltic episode of This Is Flight's Airshow Dispatches series. That's Series 2, Episode 6. The Polish Air Force Su-22M Fitter was a late addition to the flying programme, flying as a solo rather than the more typical pairs demonstration. But given some of the very serious problems blighting the fitter fleet in recent years, particularly with regard to its ejection seat, it's a pleasure to see the Su-22 in the sky at all. It's hard to convey on video, so I don't know how well it's coming across, but you might get a bit of an idea at times just how close the aircraft came on some of these passes. Never judge a display based on video alone, because you just can't tell how close it is, how much dead time there is, but I can assure you this got really quite exciting at times, even if it wasn't the most sophisticated of display routines. One of the most anticipated events on the US Airshow calendar was the Spirit of St. Louis Airshow, with its double jet team lineup, featuring the Red Arrows and the Blue Angels, alongside other rare military and civilian performers. Among the most unique aircraft in the flying display is the future advanced jet training aircraft of the US Air Force, the Boeing Saab T-7 Red Hawk, or as it was known at the time of the show, the TX. This is the aircraft which will replace the T-38 Talon in US Air Force service, and is expected to become operational in 2023 or 2024. The US Navy are up next with an MC-130J Hercules leading a pair of EA-18G Growlers. The Growler is the electronic warfare version of the F-18F Super Hornet.
They are the reason your Special Operations Air Commandos can be any place, anytime, anywhere. And now let's watch as they demonstrate for us that maximum effort assault landing.
Then a legacy flight with an F-18F Bearcat joining one of the Growlers, and that's followed by a short Growler demonstration.
And then we'll have you both back taxi the runway while I have the TX come in. On the deck.
All the way from the United Kingdom and opening their display in formation with a Spitfire Mark 9C, this is the Royal Air Force aerobatic team, the Red Arrows. The 2019 Red Arrows display was quite similar in some ways to the 2008 display routine performed during the Red Arrows' last North America tour, although European fans may notice it has been slightly simplified in the United States to meet FAA airshow regulations. That's fairly normal when European aerobatic teams cross the Atlantic and vice versa. Over the course of the 11-week 2019 North America tour, the Red Arrows completed 21 displays and 30 flypasts in 25 cities across the continent. It was billed as the largest Red Arrows tour in a generation. This is the crowd favourite Jippo break.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've been watching the Red Arrows!
To Europe one last time, and Lleida Airport in Spain hosted the well-established Festa al Cel show for the third consecutive year. It was a slightly smaller lineup than usual in 2019, headlined by the Spanish Air Force F-18 Hornet and the Patria Asper helicopter formation team. You can see all of that in the standalone Airshow Dispatch episode from This Is Flight. But here we focus on the Spanish Army, and our privileged viewing spot is up at the top of the control tower. A multifaceted display from the CH-47 Chinook, showing off the aircraft's very broad operational capabilities. First up, a parachute drop, and the Chinook really is ideal for missions such as troop transport and paratroop missions such as this one, with its roomy cabin capable of accommodating up to 55 passengers depending on how extensively they are kitted out. The aircraft then descends to demonstrate its heavy lift capabilities, and the Chinook really does come into its own here, capable of carrying an underslung load of around 11 tons. That's more than the Chinook's empty weight, so one Chinook helicopter is hypothetically capable of carrying another underslung from hooks on the outside of the fuselage. This was surely one of the best helicopter displays it's been my privilege to witness, the Eurocopter Tiger. Introduced to service in 2003 and currently operated by 4 nations, the Tiger is a relatively lightweight attack helicopter, less armoured and less armed than the Apache for instance, but still very potent with its 30mm nose-mounted cannon and 4 weapon hardpoints. And the advantage of that lighter weight is quite exceptional manoeuvrability, particularly its roll and yaw rates, which you see demonstrated quite impressively throughout this display. We finish part 1 at the home of the US Air Force Thunderbirds, the final major air show of the season, Aviation Nation at Nellis Air Force Base. Nellis always hosts some top-quality military airshow action, particularly in the form of the spectacular Combined Arms Demonstration, which we'll turn to in a moment. But we start with a quartet of T-38 Talons, which performed as part of the opening flyover. The T-38 has been in service for over 50 years with the US Air Force, having made its first flight in 1959. And as mentioned earlier, that was actually 3 months before the combat variant, the F-5, made its first flight. Very rare to see a drone at an air show, but this is a glimpse perhaps into air displays of the future, with a flyover of the MQ-9 Reaper. And now a change of pace completely with a pair of heavies from Altus Air Force Base. First into the sky, a KC-135R Strato tanker, and it's followed by a C-17A Globemaster III. The C-17, of course, is among the most modern large military transport aircraft in the world, and it's seen a great deal of export success since its first flight in 1991, serving today with 8 nations. KC-135 aerial refueling platform, on the other hand, is much older, first flying in 1956 and based on the Boeing 707 airliner. That served with 5 nations, of which so far one has retired the type. We could hardly finish this video without taking a look at the all-new F-35A Lightning II demonstration team in its first full year of fully aerobatic demonstrations. This display has really silenced many of the critics of the F-35, a very dynamic and powerful performance indeed, which showcases some quite surprising manoeuvrability. We saw earlier in the programme the F-22 performing a pedal turn. Well, now the F-35 prepares to do likewise. This was a capability first hinted at when the F-35 performed at the Paris Air Show in 2017 in the hands of Lockheed Martin test pilots. But it wasn't until it was incorporated into the US Air Force's display 2 years later that it gained widespread attention. Not quite as impressive as the F-22's pedal turn, with the Lightning's 50-degree alpha limit compared to 60 degrees for the Raptor, but still very impressive to see the aircraft performing such a manoeuvre. Now a classic manoeuvre of display pilot Captain Andrew Dojo Olsen, the Dojo Drift. The F-35 now joins up with an F-86 Sabre for a heritage flight, one of the only air shows in the country in 2019 where the heritage flight was performed with a jet warbird. But this is the display that makes Aviation Nation so popular. The Combined Arms Demonstration, as over a dozen aircraft participate in a mock aerial battle over the skies of Nevada. First on the scene, a pair of aggressor F-16s, playing the role of the enemy, are intercepted by an F-22A Raptor. Next come more friendly forces with A-10s, F-15s, F-16s and F-35s performing attack runs. The final part of the scenario is a rescue of a downed airman by two HH-60 Pavehawk helicopters. As the helicopters arrive, the A-10s provide close air support, while the F-15s orbit high above the airfield to maintain air superiority. It all adds up to an excellent demonstration of what the US Air Force can do, and as the participating aircraft group up for their final flypasts, it's the perfect time to end our look back at the best of 2019's military airshow action. We'll see you in part 2 for much more of the same, but featuring countless warbirds and classic jets. And remember, you can see longer videos of most of these individual displays and others at the Airshow Stuff and This Is Flight YouTube channels. From Airshow Stuff and from This Is Flight, thank you for joining us, and see you in part 2.